Hello, my name is Aleeza, and today I'm going to be talking to Alicia from Invictus Wellbeing about the communication skills that they don't teach you in school or college. Hi Alicia, thanks for joining us.
Hi, it's really nice to be here.
Why do so many young people struggle to ask for help when they start working?
So I see this all the time in my line of work. When you kind of leave the school system and you enter work, it can be really difficult because I feel like there's that expectation that you're supposed to prove yourself, like you're supposed to prove yourself as a competent worker, and that just isn't the case at all. I guess it's hard because at school and college you're kind of graded individually, so asking for help can be quite overwhelming and it can just feel like you've failed at something, but that isn't the case. In the workplace when you're working, it's actually a really big strength to ask for help and to say, I need support. It shows that you're aware of your own issues and that you just need that extra support to help you to do better at your job, and it just shows that you care and that you want to do things properly. I always tell the young people I work with that asking for help isn't about you saying, no, I can't do this. It's about you saying, I need more support and I want to do this well, and I feel like that's completely different.
Yes, that is. How can young people tell the difference between I should figure this out myself and I need support?
I usually suggest that you should give it a few minutes, 15 minutes, to kind of see where you're at and then decide. Maybe figure it out on your own.
Yeah.
And if you're still struggling, that's kind of your cue to seek support and ask for help. But if you're confused about any instructions, if anything feels unclear, or you feel that the expectations at work have put on you are different to what you're used to, then I feel like you should definitely seek support. And also if you're worried that you might make a mistake, it's always better to ask for help than to do something and to do it wrong and impact something. There's no harm in asking for help.
Yeah.
Some workplaces kind of value being efficient, and spending 3 hours guessing is usually not that great, whereas if you ask a clear question you can get something done in like 5-10 minutes.
Yeah, honestly, a very good message. Why is setting boundaries at work so hard for young people?
I feel like there's a power dynamic when you first start working. I guess it can be different when you're an adult and you've been for a few jobs, but when it's your first job, you feel the need to kind of impress your manager and everyone higher up. You really want to be eager, that you're ready to work and that you're ready to do well. And that is great because it shows that you're passionate and enthusiastic, but it can also be really difficult because it means that you're kind of at the mercy of your work, if you know what I mean. Like I've seen that some people say yes to doing extra shifts, yes to doing things out of their working hours, or even last minute tasks that'll kind of take them over their working hours.
Yeah.
And that can really quickly bleed into you being seen as being available all the time, and your manager always saying, oh, can you do this, can you do that, and you being expected to say yes. And instead of putting those boundaries down in the first place, your manager or people higher up can maybe assume that, well, they've previously said yes to everything, so why won't they say yes this time? Then it could lead to conflict. And the issue is not setting those small boundaries early on. So I feel in terms of setting boundaries, one thing that you can do is saying, oh, I can't really do that day, or I can't do this day, but I could do another day. I think quite a lot of people feel that when you're setting boundaries, it can be you being mean or confrontational, and that's not it. It's just about you just being polite and saying, oh, look, I know you asked if I can do this shift, but I'm busy tonight, I can't do that. So boundaries are there for you. They protect your energy, they protect your mental health, and they protect you from feeling resentful. And at the end of the day, protecting your boundaries and your energy always protects your mental health. So I say, start small and go from there.
Yes, that is quite true. The boundaries, yes. Yeah. What are the signs that someone is struggling but not speaking up?
When young people are struggling with their mental health, they don't really say directly. Yeah. You'll notice little signs, probably like they're a little bit quieter. In meetings, they won't really ask as many questions. They might work a lot more shifts to overcompensate. But I think underlying there's quite a lot of issues in terms of mental health. Like some people feel like they're a burden. They feel like they're too much, so they'll overwork to overcompensate. And they might stay quiet because they feel like, oh, well, no one cares about my opinion, I'm not important. But you can also see the opposite, which can be, more mistakes because young people are overwhelmed and that higher case of burnout. And it can be really, really difficult to see the signs because they're both two different opposites. But if you are struggling at work, and it is quite a lot, it doesn't mean that you're not capable. It might mean that the expectations are too high or there's a lack of support there and it's not aligned to you and your values, but that's fixable. And it's always important to seek support from your manager or just even a colleague that you trust.
Yeah. How does poor communication impact mental health during this transition?
So when you're used to a regular 8:30 till 3:30 at school and even a regular consistent routine in college, it can be quite a big change to go from school and college to a working environment where everything's new. You know, you're with new people that are different ages and different backgrounds. It's a really, really big identity shift, and if you've not had proper boundaries set in place where you know what's expected of you at work, like what's workload is, and you feel like you can't speak up, or you're worried to speak up because you're worried that people think you're a burden, or that you should know what you're doing already, it can be quite overwhelming because the pressure builds and you feel like you're expected to know everything when you're not. And it's a big stigma, I guess, that you're supposed to just know automatically what you're doing, you're supposed to just do the job. But when you're doing a new skill and you're taking the time to learn, it can be expected that you're just going to make mistakes. But it can be difficult when the communication is poor because you just feel more and more stressed and you feel like you can't speak up. And you internalise that stress as well, you know, you feel like it's on you and that you should do better and be better. But when that stress builds and builds, it turns into anxiety and then burnout and this complete exhaustion, which isn't what we want. So you're allowed to make mistakes, you can learn, you know, we're all human at the end of the day and we're not going to be perfect at every job. And it's just about knowing that when you're doing a new task or a new skill, you're not going to be immediately good at it, but you will get there, it just takes time.
Yes, that was amazing.
Thank you.
What is the difference between being assertive and being difficult?
Being assertive is about being respectful.
Yes.
Like when you assert your boundaries or assert what you need, you're saying with confidence but in a kind way, you know, I need this or I'd like this. Whereas being difficult is being disrespectful and not really being flexible in terms of boundaries. When you're assertive, you're flexible and say, okay, well, I could do this instead and this. Whereas when you're difficult, you're like, no, it's kind of like a my way or the highway mentality, like it's so black and white. So if you're assertive, you could say, the work's a little bit too much, I'm feeling a little bit stressed. Is there any way we could review the tasks that I do or my priorities and see if we can figure something out? It focuses on the situation and how you can move forward from it. It doesn't really focus on the person or their manager. It just focuses on the situation, how it can be changed to make that person feel a little bit better. I feel like a lot of young people feel that they've got to say yes all the time and that they've got to stay small and they've got to just take everything on without, you know, kicking up a fuss and saying, I don't think this is okay. But you've got to speak up for what you want because at the end of the day, it all impacts you. You know, the stress and the anxiety isn't worth it for a job that puts all these demands on you.
Yes. Why do young employees avoid giving feedback to managers?
I guess because it could feel like a risk.
Yes.
There's, especially in most corporations and jobs that you work in, there's kind of a hierarchy of workers, managers, senior managers, CEOs. And it can be difficult to speak up because then you're labelled as being difficult and being too much. And I imagine that gets fed around quickly and everyone feels like you're too much and there could be no snide comments. And it's tough because someone speaking up could be them just giving feedback, but to like a higher manager it could be them just being a lot, when in reality that young person hasn't been shown how to do their job and they just want that clarity. Feedback, I always say, it can just be structured and it can be calm. And it can just be as simple as, you know, when deadlines change, it just makes me feel quite overwhelmed and it kind of impacts how I plan for things. Is there any way that I could get earlier notice? And it doesn't have to be rude and abrupt. It can just be a conversation and it's not about being confrontational. It's just about being collaborative and changing work practices to make things easier for young people.
How can young people advocate for their mental health needs at work?
You don't have to disclose everything to get support. I know quite a lot of young people feel that they've got to disclose everything under the sun that they've got going on, but that isn't true. You know, you can talk about as much as you want. Some people with anxiety and low mood feel, you know, I've got to say everything, and you absolutely don't. You can just say, no, I really struggle with this and this. Focusing on adjustments in the workplace can be really beneficial. You don't have to say you've got a diagnosis, like you'd have to say, I've got anxiety, therefore I need this. You can say, you know, sometimes I feel overwhelmed in this situation, therefore a little bit more clarity or instructions broken down could be easier for me. I think there's that stigma that you've got to say everything when you don't really have to. And also just remembering that you're not asking for special treatment and to be prioritised over all your colleagues. You're just wanting the bare minimum, the basics to help you feel comfortable in a job and to help you get on with it. You know, we're all entitled to feeling safe in our workplace and having the adjustments that help us feel better and feel like we can do well in our work. You deserve to do well in your job and to not just be surviving and be exhausted every time you come home.
I think that's quite important for young people especially. What should schools and colleges be doing differently?
I feel like we don't really teach young people how to navigate power dynamics or
Yeah.
conflict or professional conversations, like giving feedback.
Yeah.
We kind of teach them how to pass exams and how to learn, but we don't really teach them those major things, which is why I feel quite a lot of young people fall into the trap of being overworked and burnt out when they're in a job because they feel that they just have to do everything
Yeah.
and take on everything and say yes to everything.
Yeah.
I feel that role-playing different conversations, like if there is a conflict in a workplace, if your manager did say something you wanted to raise it, that'd be really, really beneficial, and I think it would make a huge difference 'cause it would show young people that their voice does matter and that they do have the right to speak up. I think as well, there are some managers where they're significantly older than you and you feel like in terms of a respect thing, you can't really speak up.
Yeah.
So I feel that teaching them those communication skills is really beneficial, and it wouldn't even help them in the workplace, but also it'd help them in life in general with friendships, relationships, and yeah, it'd be a really beneficial skill.
Yeah. And to finish us off, if you could teach every young person one communication skill before they start working, what would it be?
I think I'd teach young people to advocate for themselves, you know, to be their own biggest cheerleader and to speak up for themselves. I always say to my young people, you know, if they had their favourite teacher or their parent or caregiver in the room and someone asked their caregiver a question, what would their caregiver say? And then say that. It can be really difficult when you're used to, you know, parents, carers, guardians, teachers speaking up for you, so it can be really hard when there's no one there. So I'd definitely teach self-advocacy.
Yeah.
This could be, you know, explaining what you need in terms of reasonable adjustments, or whether you need a little bit more time to do a task, asking for clarity, or even saying, you know, I don't really feel comfortable doing this, I can't do this, can we work around this? I feel like doing so, you kind of protect confidence in your well-being, and you're also putting yourself first, and you're learning these skills in a job. So in the future, when you've got maybe your dream job or another job that you want to do, you know that you can put those boundaries in place and that it will be okay.
Yeah.
You just need to know that your voice has value and that it's impactful.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for talking to us today, Alicia. I'm sure our listeners will have found that really interesting.
Thanks for having me. It's been really nice to speak to you.